Sheikh Abdul Hakim, a frequent speaker at MCMC, said something very profound. He said, I've been to hundreds of masajid all over the country, and whenever I've seen people raise their hands in response to an appeal, there's always this big smile on their face. Subhanallah, just let that sink in. It's like imagine if someone jumps in a swimming pool, it is 100% guaranteed that this person will get wet. Similarly, once we donate for the sake of Allah, it's like jumping in a pool filled with happiness. You are guaranteed to be drenched in happiness. Brothers and sisters, we are reaching out to you with an urgent appeal regarding MCMC operations. There has been no Jummah collection for almost 2 months now, and now with the masjid closed during Ramadan, it is indeed a huge financial burden. Ramadan is the time we collect funds that enable us to do hundreds of programs throughout the year. We collect funds to improve our security, to improve the overall facility, and to do outreach work throughout the year. Times are tough, and no doubt there are hundreds of good causes to donate, but upkeeping your home has to be the #1 priority. If MCMC is where you pray your daily prayers, if this is the place where you pray Jummah, Taraweeh, Eid, if this is the place where your kids learn about Allah and His Messenger, then this is your home. This is your primary responsibility to maintain your home. Please visit mcmcnj.org/themasjid and support and upkeep your home. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and your family and fill your heart with happiness.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لم يكن الذين كفروا من أهل الكتاب والمشركين منفكين حتى تأتيهم البينة رسول من الله يتلو صحفا مطهرة فيها كتب قيمة وما تفرق الذين أوتوا الكتاب إلا من بعد ما جاءتهم البينة وما أمروا إلا ليعبدوا الله مخلصين له الدين حنفاء ويقيموا الصلاة ويؤتوا الزكاة وذلك دين القيمة إن الذين كفروا من أهل الكتاب والمشركين في نار جهنم خالدين فيها أولئك هم شر البرية إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات جنات عدن تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها أبدا رضي الله عنهم ورضوا عنه ذلك لمن خشي ربه صدق الله العظيم.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Ramadan Stars. Let's begin today's discussion, inshallah. Bismillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. So, inshallah, today we'll pick up our discussion where Sister Joedia left off yesterday, talking about the amazing hospitality of the Ansaris towards the Muhajirun, and specifically the hosting of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam by Abu Ayyub al-Ansari radiyallahu anhu. So let's move on to the next phase of their life in Medina. Now, once most of the Muslims had migrated to a new place, listeners, what do you think is the next step? What are they going to do next? So, to give you a little hint, today's topic is building blocks. So if you were thinking that it's to set a strong foundation and to build a masjid, a center where salah, teaching Islam, learning Quran from the best teacher, the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then you are correct. That was the first task, the first job the Prophet undertook as soon as he arrived in Medina. He connected the Muhajirun and Ansar, like you learned yesterday. He connected the Muhajirun and Ansar, and by doing that, he established bonds of brotherhood between them. And they were doing everything for the sake of Allah, so their bonds were just so strong. They helped each other, they treated each other like their own family, and they did all of that for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And inshallah, tomorrow's discussion will talk more about that. But going back to the masjid, there's an incredible story of how the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam decided where it was going to be built. Now let's pause for a moment. So those of you who are listening, how many of you have been to the Prophet's Masjid in Medina? To Masjid al-Nabawi in Medina, how many of you have been there? If you haven't been there, you can watch videos online and you can look at its pictures online. You can also look at the masjid and its grand size on a channel. It's titled Medina Live on YouTube. And when you look at the masjid now, it's incredible. It's huge, and when you enter the masjid gates, I mean, you can't help but be just filled with awe. Like, just look around. There are these pillars and there is marble on the floor, and it's just incredible, right? So, but I want you to remember that that's not how the masjid started. When the masjid was first built, as you can see on the screen, when it was first built, it was a fraction of the size of the masjid as it is today. And then over time, the masjid expanded. If you look at the masjid here, and I'll go into more detail, inshallah, this is a picture from an exhibit in Medina, and it's called the Madain Project. And you see how this was the size of the masjid. This right here, it's not true to size, of course, but this is how the masjid looked like. And once, inshallah, I go into detail, you'll see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to be telling you a story, and it's related in Sahih al-Bukhari. How exactly this came to happen, how exactly Muslims decided where the masjid was going to be. So it's related in Sahih al-Bukhari that the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam entered Medina riding his camel, and people began to walk alongside him, right? And until the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam's riding animal, it kneeled at the location which was to become the masjid of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The location was already being used as a place of prayer for Muslim men. So remember, there were pretty much everyone had come before the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was one of the last to come. So people who were there before him, they had already started using that place as a prayer location, and it had previously been used as a land where dates were dried out and where they processed dates, and it was owned by two orphans. Their names were Sahel and Suhail radiallahu anhuma. And they were both living in the household of Asad ibn Zurara radiallahu anh. When the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu camel knelt down to the ground, the Rasul sallallahu said, "This, inshallah, is the place. This, inshallah, is the place." Meaning, this is the place that's going to be where my masjid will be. So the Rasul sallallahu then, he called the two young boys and he negotiated with them the purchase of the land, the price for this land. And their response was, they were Muslims, they loved the Rasul sallallahu and they knew it was an honor for them to just give this land for the masjid. And they said, "No, we will instead give it to you, Ya Rasulullah. We're not going to take money for this." And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu he refused to accept the land from them as a gift. And he continued discussing it with them, and he finally ended up purchasing it from them. Now, so the place itself, even though most of it was being used by, most of the land was being used by the Muslims to pray in, it still needed work. So it needed to be cleaned out. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu he worked with the Sahaba to clean out the land and to construct the masjid. Now, you have been, listeners, you've been attending these Ramadan talks, right, on the seerah of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you know the kind of person he is. By now, you know the kind of person he is. Someone who is humble, someone who was just, someone who was kind. So do you think that he was going to let the Sahaba take care of constructing the masjid, of cleaning that land, and then he would just relax, and then he would just come back when it was all constructed? Do you think he was that type of a leader? No, he was a type of leader, the type of person. He was the most important. He is the most important human being. And you can imagine he's amongst all these Sahabas who love him for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they would love nothing more than for him to just rest a little bit while they worked. But that's not the kind of leader he was. He knew that he had to set an example. So he's in it with them. He's working with them. He is constructing the masjid with them. He's cleaning it with them. And some of the features of the masjid that I want to mention, and you take a look at the picture again, are that the walls were about 6 feet high. The walls were about 6 feet high, and these walls right here, so maybe a little bit higher than an adult, or a little bit higher than how tall your parents are. And only part of the masjid had a roof. You see this right here? Only about less than half of the masjid had a roof, and the other part right here was left open. And the masjid had 3 doors. We were not able to see the doors visibly over here. The masjid had 3 doors, a door in the back of the masjid, a door on the eastern side, and this is the door the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam entered from, and a door on the western side of the masjid. After the masjid itself was constructed, you see an image of it right here. And then you see these sort of like mini rooms, right? So what are these? This is where the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his wives lived. This is where these were built for them. The ceilings, you can tell, are very low. So I told you this, the walls are about 6 feet high, and the ceilings are lower than that. So they're pretty low. And these apartments were very small, one room rather, and they're very simple. And now what do I mean by that? That they were very simple. Like I said, they only had a room and the ceilings were very low. Why do you think that these apartments were so simple? I want you to think about that answer. And while you're thinking about it, I would love to see your comments on the YouTube channel here. While you're thinking about it and you're typing your answer, I'd like to paint a picture for you. So the rich people of Medina, it's not that Medina didn't know any tall buildings. It's not that Medina, this is how all the people from Medina lived. No, the rich people in Medina lived in large houses. And in the Sira book, some of these houses are even called castles. Okay. Do you remember the name Hassan ibn Thabit from your previous Sira discussions or Sira talks? Well, Hassan ibn Thabit, who was he? He was the poet of the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right? And he was a companion who would recite poetry in defense of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and the disbelievers, at that time would spread lies and rumors about the Prophet. And the Prophet had given him permission to do that. And the Prophet and his companions encouraged him to do that, to recite poetry for the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in his defense. He was someone, would you say he's loved by the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? Yes, he was loved by the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Now, this is someone, Hassan ibn Thabit, also happened to be one of the richest men in Medina when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ migrated there. He owned and he lived in a castle, and it was called Fari. This castle was called Fari. And so they were so rich, some of the people in Medina were so rich that they lived in these castles, and these castles had names. Okay, they had their own name. And so now when I go back to the question that I asked you about a minute ago, why do you think these apartments were so simple? When you have people in Medina who invited the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, told him to come there, right? That they respected him, they wanted him to be their leader, and the Prophet could have easily, had his companions or the Ansar in Medina construct a castle for him, right? Or at least a larger living space instead of these small rooms for him. But he didn't. Why is that? Well, while you're still thinking about it, it's because he wanted to teach us that it's better to be humble. What does that mean? Does that mean we shouldn't have a big house? We shouldn't want a big house? We shouldn't want a large space? Or we shouldn't want nice things? No. It means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to have all that. He allows us to have money. He allows us to have large houses, and that's totally fine. But we shouldn't chase after them. We shouldn't, what do I mean by that? We shouldn't run after these things, that are part of the dunya so much that we forget our deen. Okay, let me say it again. We shouldn't chase after them so much that we forget our deen, that we forget to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we forget to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam could have done that very easily, right? He could have just hinted to the Sahaba that he wanted something like that, and they would have, happily acquiesced. They would have happily, gone ahead and made it for him, right? We know stories of how they would see, his bed, which was made out of straw, that it was marks on his, Umar ibn Khattab saw marks on the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's back, and he was saddened by that he didn't want the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to sleep on a bed that left marks on his back. But the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam always denied and always told them not that he didn't want to have a life of luxury. He didn't want to have a life where, these things just busied him, that he busied himself with these things. And so let's remember that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, let's not forget to thank him, and let's not forget to remember him, and let's not forget to ask him for anything that we want. But just while we ask him for all those things, a nice car, a big house, remember to thank him. Remember that it comes from him, that it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who gives us all that it's not just us, it's him. Okay. So after the masjid is built and the timings for salah were confirmed and established, not everyone was making it to salah, to the masjid on time. And when I learned about that, I was a little shocked, because we know that the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in Makkah, right, during Isra wal Miraj, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had finalized the order for 5 salahs a day. And now they're in Medina and people are not making to the masjid on time and they're missing salah. What's going on? How can that be? So some of the reasons were that some people would be busy in the marketplace. Some just didn't realize that salah time had started, and some would be, sleeping in the early hours, like Fajr time. Alhamdulillah, nowadays we have so many alarms we can set on our phone, on our Alexa devices, on our, we can set the adhan on our phone, on our computers, on our laptops, and we can set quite a few alarms to wake us up for Fajr, right? But what was going on then? What's going on is that the adhan hadn't been finalized yet, hadn't been confirmed yet. There was no way of the Muslims marking these times for Salah. So the question came up, how should Muslims go about calling people to Salah? And the answer was that the Rasul started to get, he gathered a few of his companions, and he was going to get the advice of a few of his close companions. And this in Islam is called mashwara or shura, asking people who are close to you, like your mom and dad, for their opinion, or a close friend you trust. Asking them their opinion on something is actually you following the sunnah. If you're about to do something big and you ask them their opinion, you're actually following the sunnah of the Rasul ﷺ, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards you for that. So try to remember that, when you ask someone their opinion, try to remember, make it a conscious effort on your part where you quickly, renew your intention that you're following the sunnah of the Rasul ﷺ, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, will put barakah in your decision. So Rasul ﷺ called a few of his companions, and they started to discuss, what do we do? How do we remind Muslims to come for Salah? And how do we remind them it's time, so they don't miss their 5 Salah a day? So some people suggested that they should raise a flag at the time of Salah. And people would see it and they would know that they should start making their way towards the masjid for Salah, for congregation prayer. But why do you think this suggestion was rejected? So this suggestion was rejected for the obvious fact that the flag wasn't going to benefit someone who's sleeping, or who's busy in the marketplace, or who is, not looking at the masjid the whole time. So the flag isn't really going to help. Someone else suggested that a fire should be lit to announce the time of prayer, but this too was rejected because, again, for the same reason it was rejected. If someone's not looking at that in that direction, how would they know? And if someone is sleeping, they would not know there was, a bonfire lit for Salah. So then someone suggested, how about we use a horn like the Jews do, but the Rasul ﷺ didn't like this idea because he didn't want to imitate another group. He wanted it to be something that was original to the Muslims. So then someone suggested a bell, but the Rasul ﷺ again, rejected that idea because Christians used the bell and he wanted something original for the Muslims. Finally, a group of people said, how about we call out? Okay, the adhan is still not finalized yet, but they said, how about we call out when it's time for Salah? And it's a small enough town and people should be able to hear, and we can do it like this way. So this idea was accepted. And later on, Abdullah ibn Zayd radiallahu anh, he was one of the callers to prayer. It's not finalized that it's going to be Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. It wasn't going to be like that. They were just going to use some words to call people to Salah. So Abdullah ibn Zayd was chosen to be one of those people. And he was about to sleep, he was about to go into deep sleep, and he had a dream that someone appeared before him, a person appeared before him, and that person taught him the adhan as we know it, as you see it on the screen right here. That person taught him that. And right away, he woke up right away, ran to the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he said to the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told him he had a dream, and a person came to him and taught him the adhan. And the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, listen to this, it's so beautiful. He said to him, dictate it to Bilal radiallahu anh, for indeed he has a sweeter voice than you. And do you think that Abdullah ibn Zayd became upset? He was offended? No. He taught the adhan to Bilal radiallahu anh. So why did I call it a beautiful response? I called it that because this shows us, and I had mentioned this at a previous Sira session also, everyone has a job and everyone has a talent, and they realized, the companions of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam realized that they weren't going to take offense at something that Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one person has one job and another person has another job based on everyone's unique abilities. And this is something I really want all of us here and all the listeners and myself included to remember, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us. We're all unique and we all have something to give. in this world. We can all make a difference and we can all benefit it. So Abdullah bin Zayd taught Bilal radiallahu an the adhan, and when Bilal radiallahu an was calling the adhan, Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu an hurried to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam because he had seen the same dream. So Bilal ibn Rabah radiallahu an and Abdullah ibn Maktoum radiallahu an, they were two callers to the salah at that time. And so they both learned the adhan and they called people like that. I want to end this discussion by going over the lessons that we learned about the masjid being the first place that was built. And while we go over these lessons, if you can think of anything else, please do type it in the comment section. The first lesson that I was thinking of while I was, while we were discussing this is how the masjid is one of the most important pillars of a community, right? And you can totally understand this very well because a lot of you attend MCMC and some of you attend Noor Academy, and you feel such a connection to everyone when you go there every day or over the weekend. You learn, you see friends, you see people whom you won't see otherwise. And during this time right now, we can feel it even more so because we don't have that privilege of going there, right? We're home and we don't have the privilege of going to a place that is so very near and dear to us, and a place to which we have such a strong connection by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you can understand why the masjid is such an important pillar of a community. The second lesson I was thinking of was that the masjid is a place of doing salah, right? But it's also a place where people get together for different programs, for different activities. It's where we go to learn about Quran, to learn about the Sunnah of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just like in the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it's incredible because this is one way of us connecting with his Sunnah. Again, we want to try to relate everything we do. We want to try to connect it back to him, to have that connection with him. And this is one way we connect to the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects our masjid and protects our community. And before we end, I want to give you a quick reminder that instead of our regularly scheduled talk on Monday, we will have an online talk by Sheikh Yasir Qadi on the virtues of Laylatul Qadr. It'll be streamed on Facebook and YouTube, just like the program is being streamed right now. Please do tune in, support your masjid and center. And we are in the last 10 nights of Ramadan, and how incredible would it be if your donation falls on Laylatul Qadr. So your parents know there's a website, a link where they can actually divide up the donation amongst the last 10 nights, and inshallah it's sure to fall inshallah on one of the on the night of Laylatul Qadr. So I hope today's session was beneficial. Inshallah, see you all next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح
الله أكبر الله أكبر لا